Okay, I believe there is some real disinformation in this country right now. It needs to be addressed. It was never the Republicans who were the racist political party in America. It has always been the Democrat Party. It has been and still is the truly racist party in America. It was Democrats that owned all the slaves. It was Democrats that owned all the slave plantations and Democrats that owned all the slave ships. It was only Democrats and foreigners that trafficked and transported the slaves from Africa and the Caribbean to America. It was Democrats who conducted all the slave auctions and only Democrats that purchased slaves at auction. It was all 7 Democrats on the Supreme Court who gave us the Dred Scott decision in 1857 by a vote of 7-2, with both Republicans on the court dissenting. You remember Dred Scott, don't you? That's the Supreme Court decision that said black slaves are just property and are not actually real human beings and therefore could be forcibly returned from the free states to their slave owners in the slave state. 7 Democrats did that. The Republicans dissented. It was Democrats who created, and only Democrats who joined, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, which was in reality an unregulated Democrat Party militia used by the Democrats to terrorize the black populations in the South. It was Democrats who instituted segregation by race and color. It was only Democrats that passed the Jim Crow laws in the South. It was only Democrats who slept with their slaves, women and men. John Wilkes Booth, the man who assassinated President Lincoln, a Republican, was a Democrat. Lynchings, only the Democrats committed lynchings of black men, women, and children. It was Democrat racists who created and believed in eugenics in the early 1900s, the theory of selectable superior genetics based on racial inferiority judged by race or skin color. That was Democrats. It was the Democratic Party that vehemently opposed the adoption of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment providing equal rights and the right to vote to the black populations of the South. They were passed by Republicans. A Democrat started Planned Parenthood specifically to kill off and reduce the black population. That was Margaret Sanger who started Planned Parenthood, and she was a eugenicist and believed in the eugenics theory of racial inferiority by color. She was trying to use her work to reduce the black population birth rate. Her work at Planned Parenthood. And the Democrats still support this stuff? And the black population still supports this nonsense? Because they have been completely duped about the true nature of the program and the project. It was a Democrat, President Wilson, who resegregated the government and the military in the 1910s and who screened the racist film Birth of a Nation at the White House, which was formerly titled The Klansman, was Democrats that installed poll taxes and literacy tests to try and stop black people from voting. It was Democrats who opposed the 1964 Civil Rights Act by filibustering the legislation for 2.5 months, a 75-day-long filibuster by the collective Democrat Party to stop the creation of civil rights for blacks and the enforcement of those rights on behalf of the black population. It was Democrats who designed the project housing systems to corral and control the black population and let them feed on each other instead of white, and which projects provide no schools or only bad schools to make sure that not many kids ever get educated enough to escape the project, today's new slave plantations, and make sure they can't escape from a project with no stores, no separate homes, no schools, no businesses, no jobs, no security, and no real protection, and a police force that is only there after the fact. And specifically, with no father in the home to ensure the welfare dependency upon the government of the single black mother for everything, with no father figure in the family or home to provide guidance for the young men. Or else the welfare check gets smaller or goes away entirely. Gee, I wonder why the Democrats are rewarding out-of-wedlock black single motherhood. Do you still wonder why? And it was a Democrat, President Johnson, who said in 1964 about the Civil Rights Act that the Republicans were forcing him to support and sign. He said, "I'll have those Negroes voting Democrat for 200 years, only he didn't say Negro. He used the N-word. Johnson was a huge racist who talked about the civil rights legislation as the N-word bill. N-word bill. According to historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, Democrat President Johnson also said this: "These Negroes, they're getting pretty uppity these days, and that's a problem for us since they've got something now they never had before, the political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. For if we don't move at all, then their allies will line up against us and there'll be no way of stopping them. We'll lose the filibuster and there will be no way of putting a brake on all sorts of wild legislation. It'll be Reconstruction all over again." Now, this was Democrat President Lyndon Johnson in 1964 talking about the Democrat Party being forced by Republicans at the time to enact the civil rights legislation. Johnson intended to use the legislation to persuade black people to vote while actually putting nothing in it and having no willingness to enforce it. Now, the Republican Party, on the other hand, didn't even exist until 1854 and was specifically created upon the single platform plank of abolishing slavery. That was the sole purpose and sole political platform for the political party's creation and reason for being brought into existence. Only to abolish slavery in America. And by 1865, 11 years later, they had done it. Both Lincoln and General Grant, a former Democrat, but reformed completely as a result of the Civil War were Republicans and were the men most responsible for winning the war and freeing the black slave population. Only Republicans did that. No Democrat supported the abolition of slavery. None. They were the slave party. No Republicans owned slaves. No Republicans owned a slave plantation. No Republican owned slave ships. No Republican trafficked in slaves. No Republican purchased slaves. Republicans on the Supreme Court decision in Dred Scott opposed the opinion. No Republicans belonged to the Ku Klux Klan. Republicans didn't segregate by color. No Republicans passed Jim Crow laws or slept with their... They didn't have slaves. No Republicans lynched the black people. Republicans didn't believe in eugenics. That was Democrat racist theory. The Republicans enacted the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They opposed federally funding the Planned Parenthood program to reduce the black population. They opposed President Wilson's filming of the racist Birth of a Nation. And they weren't the ones who installed poll taxes and literacy tests. Again, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They didn't enact it. For the entire history of America, it is the Democrat Party that has been the racist party that has abused and used the black population without providing benefit while continuously diminishing the quality of life that they are able to enjoy in the projects. I don't understand why any black person in America votes Democrat. It's just mind-boggling.